Okay, so this week is coming up to almost our 1 year anniversary of having Coach Maggie on board.
Yes.
Hold on, Max.
Stuck around for a whole year.
That's right. Has it gone fast or has it been unbearingly slow?
It's gone so fast. I cannot believe that it's actually almost been a year. That is insane to me. But it's been probably the best year ever. So
I guess a good segue as well. You know, we spoke about last week about taking it back to basics and in the whole theme of like taking it back. Like we thought it'd be cool today to do a bit of a throwback. And when we met you and Sarah were doing the Mind Strong podcast.
Yeah, we decided to have Ben and Kat on, and we were going to do a little bit of a introduction to what Married to My Macros is and everything that they're striving to be. And it turned into quite a lengthy conversation about a lot of different things. So we thought that we'd share that kind of back with you guys.
Yeah, so I guess that's sometimes a story that doesn't get told, and it's a pretty cool story. And I think that podcast was probably one of the more eloquent descriptions of it. So bit of a throwback for you guys this week. Hope you enjoy it, and if you do have any questions or anything about it in the topics that we discuss, feel free to ask as always.
Yeah, and we'll catch you next week.
Perfect.
How did MTMM come to be what it is today?
I think MTMM started right place, right time kind of thing. I think as individuals, Kat and I had both been on some pretty strange journeys with our own health and performance and everything that entailed. And I think we both definitely had a love for health and fitness, but had just become pretty disillusioned with what the industry in itself had turned into. It was called health and fitness, but it really was more systemic. Individuals just trying to make money off people's insecurities, people's ignorance, and having been on the wrong end of that, I think we got to a point where the two of us were like, well, rather than waiting for someone to step up and change a game, like, may as well be us. So I think that's primarily been the focus of everything we've tried to do with MTMM is instill education, like really try to help people overcome like this fear of food and understand like that their relationship with themselves and how that plays into it and all these kind of elements that you don't see when you're purchasing skinny detox tea or using waist trainers and all that other shit that is just everywhere. And I think it used to frustrate me before I was a practitioner, and now it's even more frustrating because the majority of people that we work with are people that have been down those paths, and it's hard to sell health. It's hard to sell long-term investment in yourself that doesn't have instant gratifying results. And it's hard to, when there are the competitors out there that are promising you can have a six-pack in 2 weeks. It's hard to go up against that, and it's not sexy to tell someone that we need to look at why you talk to yourself the way that you do, why that you fear food the way that you do, in order to really, encompass their health. I think the biggest thing for MTMM was that when we say diet, we don't just mean what you're eating, we mean everything that you're consuming, whether that be your social media, whether that be the way that you talk to yourself and the relationship that you have with yourself and what you think of yourself as a person and how that plays into self-respect and leading into that into your choices of what you choose to do for activity and food. That's basically what we wanted to do, was explain to people that diet and nutrition and health was much more than calories and macros and carbohydrates. So that was a bit ranty, but I feel like
I summed it up better myself.
I think we very fortunate. I always try to find the positive in things, and I think for a long time, my mid-20s, I was that person. I was pretty unhappy with my life and the choices that I was making, and in particular, like my body and my diet reflected that. And I did try a lot of, getting ready for stage and not eating anything and real carb depletion and keto and everything. And I think going through basically everything out there over the course of 5 or 6 years really did give me some relative perspective on, what the majority of people are doing. And I think that I find myself in a very fortunate position where, I can say to people like, I can relate. I know where you are. I know, what you want, and I now know the safest and the healthiest and the best way for us to get you to that place that you want to be. So let me save you 10 years of misery. And that's been a pretty powerful and important message that, you know, we want people to want to train because they want to see what their body's capable of, because they're happy to surprise themselves, and we want them to see food as, you know, not just fuel, but you know, there's something that they don't need to fear, that they need to understand for sure and learn about, but ultimately, like, it's, you know, good for them. It's medicine. And you just gotta, that's basically our message, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long message, isn't it?
It's a very long message.
But it's such an important one, and it's definitely one that aligns with what we're trying to do with Mind Strong as well. Is just give people digestible information that they're able to apply to their own situations and their own health journeys, and not get so caught up with all of this bullshit that's out there.
Well, and I think so much of the messaging is about that instant gratification and that instant fix, and getting the 6-pack in, you know, 2 weeks or whatever, the detox teas, whereas what we're trying to do is so much more holistic and all-encompassing, and it takes time to get there. It takes time to talk about it. It takes time to learn about it. It takes time to practice it, right? So it is a long message. It's a long process.
Yeah.
Nutrition in general, it's a grind. Like, you go into a gym, you crush a hard workout, you're lying there, you're covered in sweat, the endorphins are pumping, and you're like, yep, I've done something today. Like, I've really taken a positive step forward. You have a day of, like, perfect eating on your macros.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. And you do it again.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. But it's like, okay, how do I get you to do that for 2 weeks without any kind of feedback, until it's that penny drop moment of like, oh yeah, I do feel like I have more energy, or I am feeling like I'm pushing harder in my training sessions, or my belt is fitting, you know, a little bit better. Okay, now we're starting to get some feedback. Now we can move forward, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other biggest thing that we've tried to do is create a sense of camaraderie and community, because I think most people inherently feel like they're on their own. They're the only person that's going through the struggles that they're, you know, going through, and that everyone else was born with impeccable genetics, and, you know, that whether they find that they think they don't deserve to be healthy, or whether they think that they're not worth putting in the time and effort to learn, and all the rest. I think creating a community where, you know, people can share their story with each other and understand that they're not unique. You know, as bad as that sounds, like in today's society, like, you're not unique. You're not the only person that is worried about overeating and putting on weight and wants to feel comfortable in their skin. So let's take the fear out of it and do it together and overcome it as a squad.
Yeah, and just being able to talk about it more. I think it's become something that's more popular for people to talk about nowadays, and I think that that's making it easier on some level for people to get through it too. I mean, eating behavior and self-love and all that sort of thing was not as commonly talked about as it is today, and I think that's really positive.
Well, you got, like, overconsumption is a relatively new problem. You know, like, never have we been in a position where food is so readily available all the time. And, you know, as we've gone through, like, the Industrial Revolution, and we realized we could can food and we could preserve food, we're so quick to blame sugar or blame fat or blame, you know, whatever it is, the flavor of the day. Some of the statistics that people aren't looking at are things like the amount of time spent in the kitchen is directly correlated to the rates of obesity, because people just aren't making their own food. You know, like, little simple things like that.
I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think probably the most fulfillment we get out of the work we do is providing the seminars that we do, and when we can get in with teenagers and stuff like that, like, for us, that is the peak of what we want to do, because if we're going to change the ideas that surround food and the feelings that people have towards what being on a diet actually means, it needs to start there.
Yeah.
Right? It needs to start with 15 or 16-year-olds, you know, before they start to develop these food-fearing relationships.
Well, it's interesting too, like, every seminar we've ever done, people will come up after, and the feedback is generally like, wow, we've never been taught that before. Like, I've never had nutrition put together so cohesively. And I really was just going off these little sound bites that you get from the internet or TV or whatever, and had no comprehensive idea of what it all was. And these are, you know, like Ben said, teenagers that we're working with. It's 40-year-olds, it's 60-year-olds, it's 80-year-olds, it's across the lifespan. And it's no wonder if we have, you know, these adults raising children that don't know how to eat and don't know how to feed themselves, that they aren't passing on any, you know, positive messages or lessons. So
you forget too, like, I'm sure it's the same for you girls, when you get involved within this industry and you start to develop knowledge, you're surrounded by other individuals who have that knowledge, who understand what you're talking about. When you go and get in front of a seminar of people and you say, okay, hands up, like, who knows what a calorie is? And no one's got a clue. Like, that's the majority.
Yeah.
You forget that, like, the people that you surround yourself with aren't the majority of people. Like, we're, 5%, maybe 10%. And that's not a lot of people, right? So I think even for us, particularly as coaches and practitioners, it's important to get back into those areas where it's like, this is what we're dealing with, like people don't want to eat fats, or they want to do keto, but they don't know what that means, right? And so if you want to do keto, and this is, really an MTMM approach, is that we don't follow any kind of name protocols. Like, start with the basics. If you want to do keto because you want to see if you can be a fat adaptive athlete, then let's make sure we're doing keto properly, right? But people throw these terms around, and what's worse is other people capitalize off these terms, right? And we just get caught in this cycle of never-ending bullshit for the most part. Yeah. It's frustrating, but yeah, I guess that's, to come full circle, why we started MTMM, and like our hope for what this company is and what this company strives for is to be a beacon of truth and, of like solid information and health, and hopefully develop to the point where when people have a question about, good nutrition or training practices and what is healthy, that MTMM is something that comes to mind to sort those sources out.
Mm-hmm. And so we've planned to do a little bit of a Q&A today, and it's no surprise that a couple of the questions that we got are around the keto diet.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't shocked by, but it still just blows my mind that it's being thrown around. I think we talked about this last week already.
Yeah, we get it every time we post for questions. We get something about keto.
Well, it's just a reflect. It's always something, right? Like prior to this, it was paleo and it was Whole30, and it's just the newest fad, the newest trend, the buzzwords, right? And like Ben said, most of the time these terms are thrown around, and people A, don't know what they actually mean, or B, don't know why they want to do it. Mm-hmm. Right? When you ask 90% of people why they want to go keto, it's, because it's supposed to be good for me. Well, what does that mean? How is it good for you? Is it supposed to help you lose weight? Are you supposed to lean out? Is it supposed to improve your health biomarkers? Like, what are you looking to achieve? Mm-hmm. Right? And that should be your first question when you undertake any sort of lifestyle change.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can start by diving into the questions that we have received. So we can dive more deeper into this whole keto topic. The question that we got were the first one was, what are your thoughts around all the keto hype? And the other one was, do we create meal plans that are keto?
So, our thoughts on the keto hype. Like I said, I think it's so important to consider why you're doing something, and it is really important to define a keto-based approach to eating as a medically therapeutic diet for someone who is looking to treat epilepsy versus a diet for potential fat loss, which is what the general public is using it for, versus a diet to improve health biomarkers. I think once you've kind of settled into whichever camp you're in, then again, it's really important to look at kind of where you're at now, right? Are you an athlete who has dialed in your nutrition incredibly finitely? And like Ben says, you want to see if you can transition over and become fat adapted, because 1% of the adult population can. That might be a really interesting route to go. It might absolutely tank your training, but as long as you know kind of what the possibilities are and you want to play around, I think, that's absolutely fine. But I think for the general population looking to get healthier, looking to shed a few pounds, I think keto is a very extreme way of going about it. And ultimately, for people that do have success on it, generally speaking, from that Gen Pop perspective, it's because we've gone into caloric restriction of some form.
Yeah, so how are you supposed to know if it's keto that's actually working, or if it's just because you've automatically started focusing on your diet?
You've cut out a food group, and you've cut some calories, especially because fats are so satiating, and you can get by on a lot less. Exactly. So you don't really know, right?
So you said only 1% of the adult population can be fat adapted?
Only 1% of like elite level athletes.
Of elite level athletes?
Yeah, particularly like the studies that have been done have focused on endurance athletes over strength athletes as well, but pretty rare.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I mean, Katrina and I tend to have different clientele, I would say. Like, Kat really does have a majority of that elite level athlete, and for myself, like, my passion is really working with the general population and working to, you know, improve their health as well as their performance.
Ben Pop.
Ben Pop. And I think what we see the most with people, you know, touting keto is that they've gone from such an atrocious diet just to doing something. And it's like, well, yeah, if you're going to, you know, cut the crap out of your diet, call it keto or whatever you want, you're going to get some pretty good results. I think most people tend to miss that it's incredibly hard to eat when you're overeat, when your diet is like made up wholly of whole food sources. It's hard. It's like, you're going to get sick of chewing before your carbohydrate content of your broccoli blows out your profile. Like, it's not going to happen. But if cutting out carbs to you means that you're not eating cookies and chips and processed foods bought from the shop, like, of course you're going to see a huge decrease in your caloric intake, right?
And like Ben said, whether or not you're actually doing keto and you're doing that, that's a good thing, right? I think that the problems that we can get into when we're doing keto is if you kind of have to take the approach to planning your diet much like a vegan or vegetarian individual would, and that you have to kind of map things out. You have to make sure that you're getting a diverse array of fats into your diet and you're not just jacking up your saturated fats, which is what we see so much of.
It's kind of like that whole clickbait generation, right? It's like, let's just read the first 100 words on what's keto and use that to define the rest of our diet.
And so when you're jacking up your saturated fats and your fiber intake is dropping, because on 40 or 50 grams a day, it's pretty damn difficult to get 25 grams of fiber in for the average individual, then you are potentially putting yourself at risk for long-term health consequences like heart disease. And so if you're going to do keto, you should probably seriously consider doing it properly.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna go for a low carb, high fat based approach, then that's a totally different story, and that can be a more balanced, moderate diet. And there can be some really big health benefits to that, right?
And I think that's what a lot of people think keto is.
But
yeah, 100%.
If you tell me you're doing keto and then you can't tell me what your ketone levels are, you're not doing keto, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I see that all the time with clients. They'll say they're doing keto, and then I'm asking them what their daily intake looks like, and they're like eating way too much protein, and they don't realize that if you eat too much protein, you're not going to become fat adapted, or like they're still eating all the fruits and vegetables that they want. And yeah, people just don't know what it is. Like, I like that you said people just read kind of the first few words on keto diets and jump in before doing their research.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we want that like instant, like, oh, I could just do keto for 2 weeks, right? And then what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's easy to, you could fast for 2 weeks if you had the mental fortitude to get through that. But then what happens after that, right?
Yeah.
And, we know, like, from all the metadata and all the research, we know that the number one success factor in, like, long-term weight loss and sustainability is adherence to a program over long periods of time. And if you're going to be adherent over long periods of time, you don't want to cut out a macronutrient, right? Why would you want to cut out vegetables?
Mm-hmm.
For the average person, like, why? What does that stem off your mind that it's like, in order to improve my health, I'm going to stop eating processed foods and stop eating vegetables? Like, it's just, yeah, the mind boggles sometimes.
Yeah.
Or my favorite conversation at a dinner party, we were talking to a couple that had recently started keto, and they were talking about how much they loved it, and they were just loving having their bowl of popcorn every night with tons of butter thrown on, and their glass of wine.
And a glass of wine.
And we're like, oh, do we even get started here? But it is that, like, that instant gratification, that clickbait, that not digging deep into things and really understanding what they are and why you're doing them, right? If you can't tell me why you're doing something, you should probably look at that.
Have you ever worked with an elite athlete who has tried keto?
Endurance-wise, no. I've worked with a couple who we've kind of toyed with the idea, but when we presented it as, we can try this, but you might lose a year of training.
They said no.
They're like, yeah, no, okay, maybe not.
Yeah.
Weightlifters, I've done a lot of low carb, high fat, kind of in the 80 to 100 gram range of carbs. But I've never done true keto with any of them because I've never dropped their protein.
Right. I also, this isn't a question that we got, but it's a question I have on a similar train of thought. What are your guys' thoughts on intermittent fasting?
Interesting question.
How long is a piece of string? Right?
No, I love intermittent fasting. I'm fascinated by it. I am a little bit conflicted with the research that is out there because there is no good longitudinal data, and I am a total research nerd. I think the problem with nutritional programming in general is there is no good longitudinal studies on almost anything. And so we have to take these imperfect studies, and we have to take anecdotal evidence, and we have to combine all of these and kind of critically think about things when we're making an evaluation on a program. It's not perfect science, which drives me nuts, but it's kind of what we've got. Intermittent fasting, again, why are you doing it? What's the why behind it? For a lot of my clients who have used it for fat loss, it has been absolutely wonderful, primarily because of the behavioral control, right? It puts some limits, and I know for myself that's very true as well on that. Like Ben said, if you're doing keto but you don't know what your ketones are you actually doing it? I would kind of argue the same thing with IF. If you don't know if you're going into ketosis at the end of it, are you using it as an agent to get you into an accelerated fat burning stage, or are you just using it as behavioral modification? I think 90% of individuals use it as behavioral modification, and it works for them.
And it works.
So
yeah.
Great, and there could potentially be some long-term health benefits from those fasts. Again, research is still a little sketchy, especially as we look at different protocols, right? Like an 8 and 16 or a multiple days a week fast. But certainly to date, there's absolutely no evidence that it's harmful. It may have some benefits for long-term health, and if it works for people to help them meet their goals and they're still keeping their intake nice and high, I think it's a great option for a lot of people. Who it's not a great option for is some people with really altered schedules. We do use it a lot with our shift workers, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I would say another big issue that we come up against is people doing their training sessions fasted, and dependent on your sport and your intended training stimulus. That can be a big problem.
And you conducted a little bit of your own research on this at one point, right?
About 2.5 years worth. So, I use myself as a guinea pig. It's funny you should mention it because I actually just went back on IF this week after a 2-year hiatus, again, for the behavioral aspects, just to try and get some of that nighttime snacking under control and such. But for myself, I am a internationally ranked Olympic weightlifter. I still compete. I was in the process of dropping a weight class when I first started IF, and so at that point I was doing DEXA scans for my body comp analysis, and I had more than enough muscle mass. I mean, you can always take more, right? But there was enough for my needs at the time, but I definitely had some fat to lose. So I did IF for 2.5 years, and I think after the first 1.5 years, I was no longer getting into ketosis on those 16-hour fasts, but it was still working for me, so I continued with it. What I did find over that period of time was that I was able to drop a weight class. I was able to cut a substantial amount of body fat, and I was able to leave my lean mass intact, like to the ground. But when you consider that in the context of 3-hour training sessions, 5 to 6 days a week, doubles multiple days a week, and you consider that there's no lean mass gain over 2 years, that's also pretty significant. So in terms of like my overall strength, my numbers did go up by means of technical gains, But for a lot of athletes, 0 muscle mass gain over 2 years would be absolutely unacceptable.
And were you making sure that you were not ever training fasted, or did sometimes you have
Sorry,
to train
no,
fasted?
I should have started with that. I almost exclusively trained fasted.
Okay.
Because I was working as a shift worker, and I was working a lot of night shifts as well. My period was I was using a 2 to 10 window, and I would train at about 10 a.m.
Okay.
And just kind of branch with BCAAs until I started eating. So yeah, all fasted workouts for 2 years. Workouts felt great, but
yeah,
strength gains.
I think
pretty poor.
That's something to be said as well. Like, in the lack of all that, at the moment, that longer term research, I think that anecdotal evidence really does have a point to play, but I think we get into trouble when people try to take their own personal anecdote and apply that to a population.
Absolutely.
Right. So, does IF have benefits? Yeah, sure. If you feel fantastic on IF and you train fasted and you feel like you're getting stronger and your numbers are going up, keep doing what you're doing. Like, do you, but don't try to get everyone following your plan.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and it goes the other way around with research too. Like, just because we have these big studies that show averages for, a
Right.
majority of the population doesn't mean that it's going to work for every individual.
Right. How do you know you're not an outlier? Right.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And that's where we see, the internet's been great for information. And if anything, now we live in an age where there's too much information, which is where a lot of, people do get confused. And I think that's part of the issue, is that something's worked for someone. They've publicized it, blogged about it. Now they've got a following and everyone's trying to replicate. And that's where we see people getting into trouble, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very true. It's like when you go in and you program for a client and you can have all of the kind of scientific protocols in the world and it's not working. Well, you have to now try something different. You have to deviate. You have to listen to the client's body, right? Because all of that means nothing if they're not responding.
I think we want to move away as well from completely overhauling whatever someone is doing from day one. If someone is, for some clients, the first week is like, if you can just drink enough water this week, we'll consider that a massive win. And so when you get clients like that, you might have an ideal profile that you want them to work towards. But for most people, it's a journey to get there. It's not just like right, here's your profile, slap on the ass, see you in 3 months, like, let's do this. And so, yeah, I think that needs to be communicated with the client as well. Like, okay, we want to just take some pretty small but significant steps. And if you're not willing to commit to yourself to 6 months, like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to go down this road? Right.
That we also got a question back to the Q&A. And it was, what are the best steps to take when someone wants to start eating better, which I think kind of ties into what you were just saying, like starting with things as simple as drinking more water. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely physical things that you can implement pretty quickly and pretty easily. If you know something's not good for you, like, no brainer. But I think like a lot of, and I wrote a blog post on this the other day, like, I think if you really want to start any kind of significant change, you need to start with the way that you talk to yourself. Okay. So like, even when you're halfway through a workout and you want to quit, just telling yourself, like, being encouraging is going to get you through the workout more than telling yourself that you're a piece of shit, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing when it comes to your diet. If you don't think that you're deserving of health, or you think it's too late for you or anything else, anything that you do try to change is not going to stick around, because primarily there's a foundational issue that needs to be addressed. So if I can get you talking to yourself in a manner that is, you encouraging you and you wanting to change to better yourself so that you can be a better person for your family, whatever it is, that is how we're going to open the door to all these profile changes and all these different protocols and everything else. That comes way later, right? Mm-hmm. If you're, continually just badgering yourself like every day, it doesn't matter what your macro profile is.
I think that probably leads into like the second thing that you do, right? It's like, once you've kind of got someone on board with that, it's moving away from demonizing food, right? And stopping, ceasing looking at food as like good or bad, but looking at the things in your pantry, the things in your cupboard, and like, how do I feel when I eat that, right? And that kind of ties into removing items that don't make you feel well, right? So you can kind of learn how your body responds to food, and dialing it into how you respond to a particular food will go infinitely far, right? Because that is that unique client-specific piece that gets missed in all of the online macro calculators, right? Like, yeah, you can eat 300 grams of carbs a day, and that might be great for you. But if you're eating 300 grams of oats and you don't respond well to it, you know,
it's not going to go over too well.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to our calorie question as well, right? Like if you're currently not doing anything, starting with a macro profile, like the greater majority of people don't understand the difference between 300 grams of oats and 300 grams of carbohydrate, right? So I think like, don't overwhelm yourself and get caught up on the minutiae. Just start small. Like do things you know are going to be, you know, drink more water, eat more vegetables, eat less processed foods. Like just start there. Start with anything, right? But yeah, you gotta be up for the journey, right? You gotta love the process.
People always, because I've always been like very particular in the way that I eat, especially when I'm eating out or something like that. Like I'm always avoiding certain foods, and people are always looking at me being like, oh, okay, so you're not eating that because that must be bad. And it's so hard to explain to them that, no, this makes me feel bad. So I avoid it. And I don't crave it. I don't miss it. I don't get tempted to have it because I know how bad it makes me feel. It's not necessarily a bad food. It's just, it'd be like a fatty meat or something like that. It just doesn't sit well with me and doesn't make me feel good. So I don't eat it. But it doesn't mean that that's
great for the person sitting next to you.
It always makes me laugh. And this is why I really enjoyed your post before the holidays. Like, how are we in a position where we agree that the majority of people don't know anything about food, but also feel like it's their place to comment on how other people are eating?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think like the big feedback I always get from clients is that the comments people are getting like, oh, you're eating too much. And it's like, relative to what?
Yeah.
Like,
and
what does that
they're
even
eating
mean?
too much broccoli, they're eating too much carrots, and you know, are they eating too much because there's a giant bowl of chips sitting in front of them? Like, those are very different.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good segue into, I know you guys chat a lot about like intuitive eating.
Yeah.
And I think I think intuitive eating is a very, very interesting topic. Like, believe it or not, I've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in your approach to that.
Yeah, because we're married to my macros, so intuitive eating may seem to not necessarily fall under that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I think it depends on the individual again. I know for myself, given my own personal history, I know a lot of the guests you guys have had on, the advice tends to be to stay away from potentially the tracking because it can be overwhelming and obsessive and stuff like that. But I think, again, it comes down to perspective. And again, like, comes down to empowering the individual. And I think for me personally, I enjoy tracking because, like, I know that I have flexibility, but that I also have control. For whatever reason, I'm a terrible intuitive eater. I'm just like, I think, like, I know that if I'm bored or I'm procrastinating or like whatever else, studying is a really big one, like reading Kat's textbooks. So like, get up for a break. And if you just like have like a small handful of walnuts every time you like get up to have a glass of water, by the end of the day, like, that's potentially a lot of walnuts, right?
Especially when you work from home and pass the kitchen every like 20 seconds.
Yes.
So I think for myself, I quite like having that power and control, but equally, I'm not going to force myself to, if I get to the end of the day and I've missed a meal and I'm behind, I'm not going to force myself to the point where I feel sick because I need to meet profile. I think that's the big difference. Is it's great to have these goals that you're working towards, and you should be aiming to hit those consistently. But I think it's learning that it's like, okay, today wasn't a perfect day. I did my best. I start again tomorrow. Right?
Or if somebody asks you to go out for dinner or something like that, you've got to weigh what's important to you at that moment, and most important.
And that's going to change, right? Like, depending, especially as a competitive athlete, where you're at in your comp season. Like, are you heading into comp? Are you in the middle of a cut? That's very different than in September. We both came off comp season. We had nothing lined up for a couple months. We went to Europe. we had an Airbnb in Greece, so I tracked the first week in Greece, and then we were in Italy, and I enjoyed all the pasta and the pizza, and that's okay, right? Like, it's okay to be flexible in your approach, and I'm quite similar to Ben in that tracking makes me feel a sense of accomplishment. It's when I physically feel my best because I have no internal gauge. But for a lot of my clients, I would never put them on profiling, right? Like for a lot of them, it would have really negative effects emotionally, and there's no need to do that. There are other ways to approach eating than just hitting a macro profile.
Mm-hmm. I think it's probably worth mentioning that it's taken us 5 or 6 years to get to this point, right? Like, this is not a point that we started at and it's worked perfectly, and as such, we think everyone should do it. When we were in Europe, every time I saw a cat pull her phone out, I was like, you're kidding, aren't you? Like, I think, like, having done something like the tracking for so long, like, intuitively, I know when I'm looking at my plate where I'm going to be deficient and where I'm going to be over. And when you're in Rome, you're clearly going to be just like, it's just carbs everywhere. So it's like, okay, put the phone away. I'm here for 10 days. What am I going to do? Not eat pasta? Like, not try the pizza? Not go... It's like, I'll deal with it when I get back, and it's back to reality.
Yeah.
Right?
And I find that experiencing those kind of things with somebody else really helps. 'Cause I know for myself, when I went traveling, I was trying to look at it the same way, like, okay, I'm just going to take this time off tracking, just kind of eat intuitively. But if I didn't have my friend there with me who doesn't know what a macro is, I don't know if I would have been so successful at not tracking, because I was just kind of going off her hunger signals, or like just, it wasn't in my head because she wasn't tracking, didn't know what tracking was, so I could kind of forget about it. But were you guys both, like, how did that work?
Well, I guess, I mean, we had a lot of family there, and our family is...
They're eaters.
Yeah. They're not only eaters, they're feeders, right? And so a lot of, like, the way that we celebrate and the way that my sisters and my mum show their love is to cook. And so, that's obviously been something that I've battled with, through my 20s, when it's like, what are you going to do? Like, disrespect people by, like, not eating, or, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess that's gotten to a point where it's like, they just kind of accept that's who I am, or, like, put in a request, be cheeky enough to, like, request specific foods. If they're going to cook, they may as well just cook up heaps of, like, stuff that I want to eat.
Yeah.
But, like, in somewhere like Europe, like I said, I mean, for me, it was just like, I'm just going to enjoy this while I'm here. And
I think having the two of us is a massive strength that we maybe don't acknowledge as much as we should, right? Because we have each other, and we know that there's going to be this, like, lavish meal out later, and so we'll have our shakes earlier in the day. Ben will whip up, like, a tuna salad for us, and we'll eat well so that we can enjoy it and not stress about it and move on. I think that having that support alongside you goes really far.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in moments of weakness.
Yeah.
It's very rare that we're both on the same page to want to order pizza or go for ice cream. Like, usually one of us will be like, would you get pizza? And the other one's like, oh, nah. It's like, I'm not going to do it on my own. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas when you live in a share house with a couple of people and you have, like, Uber Eats and all the rest of it, like, it's whatever's fair game. So I definitely agree that it does help. But yeah, it's funny.
It's why you want to, manipulate all the people around you into a healthier lifestyle. Right. So that you can execute yours.
I guess that's something else that we do focus on too, is that, as much as we have calories and macros, like, food is more than numbers on a spreadsheet, right? And if, we, like I mentioned before, like, we really do consider diet everything that you consume, right? And so if you're not able to enjoy social occasions, if you can't go around to your family's house for dinner or for a birthday because your diet is so restrictive that it's causing you that much stress, like, again, it's back to adherence. How long are you going to be able to follow something like that? And that's a big one that we really try to drum home, is that, like, if it's not going to be the one meal that you have off program each week that's not getting us where we want to be, chances are it's going to be the other 35 meals that you're eating over the course of the week, unless that cheat meal is just ridiculously epic. And I think that's again, it comes back to really installing like that empowering through education and trying to remove that fear that people have, because that is the fear that they've done well all week and now they're terrified that they're going to have one meal off and be back at square one.
Yeah, I get that a lot with clients, and I think...
So is that something that you guys program in, like off-plan meals or cheat meals?
Well, I wouldn't say cheat meals. Again, we like to be very cautious of the terminology that we're using. And so if you play club league hockey and after hockey you always go for a burger with the hockey team, obviously we're going to talk strategies to like what we might change a little bit in that day so that overall we can make that fit more appropriately. But I'm not going to tell you, no, you can't go and have a burger with your mates. Like, it's ridiculous.
And I think, yeah, when you're actually doing the numbers and you're working out someone's like total weekly caloric intake, if it is like that one meal out every week that they like, or they have this one special treat that they like to enjoy for an off program, I generally will factor that in and level it out throughout the week.
Mm-hmm. That's why I like to know, like, if there's anything upcoming in the client's like next week, so that we can take that into consideration and say they know which restaurant they're going to. Maybe it can help them like look through the menu so that it doesn't completely throw them off. And sometimes not only like maybe that's not even necessary for them to continue to make progress, but for them mentally it gives them a lot more like they're not stressing out when they're at dinner with their friends. They're
enjoying it. Like they should be, right?
Yeah, they're not feeling like they're doing something wrong or whatever.
Because if you can't ever eat a meal off program for fear that you're going to backtrack, that program is not sustainable. Yeah. You were on a ticking clock with that.
It's emotions like guilt and remorse and that we're trying to remove from the equation when it comes to food. And in all seriousness, if you're not 2 weeks out from stage, or you're not halfway through a water cut to make weight for it because your sport is a weight class based sport, why can't you go for a burger with your mates?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it comes back to what your goals are. And if you are deciding that stage is the goal for you, or that this is the weight class for you, then understand that you're actively making a decision that there's going to be certain times during the year when, no, it's not okay to do those things because they don't align with that goal. But if your goal is to just get into better shape, be healthier, improve your biomarkers, drop a pant size, then yeah, of course there's room for it.
Yeah, knowing that ahead of time helps so much with like not just blowing it afterwards.
Yeah, not having that like fuck it mentality.
Or like, I've messed this up, so the whole day is shot, and I may as well go big if I've shot the whole day, right?
Yeah, that's what you want to try to avoid, because that just leads to more guilt and feelings of remorse and such.
Start that downward spiral. Momentum's like one of those things too, right? Like if we get it moving in the right direction, it's very powerful, but equally it's a very powerful force coming back the wrong way.
Yeah.
So whatever we can do to keep moving forward. But yeah, those are those conversations where you have, it hasn't been a good week. Okay, stop, take a breath. What are we going to do about it to make sure that this week is better? Right? How are you feeling about MTMM and being part of the team? And
meh, I was kidding.
Could be better.
So she's like, Sarah, see what I have to deal with on the daily?
I think that...
I asked him, how's his day going? I'm still here.
No, it's great. I mean, I never really pictured myself working as a nutritionist with other people in the same like line of work, like the same type of company. And then like we were just talking about this before we started this podcast, when Ben and I first met, we scheduled a Skype conversation because I was just curious to see how they were doing business, how like what kind of clients they worked with. My friend had mentioned them to me, and Ben just started talking, and I thought I was listening to myself basically. And everything, like all the values that I have and put into my coaching and that sort of thing, he was just reciting to me, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And I think that working with you guys and being able to verbalize like what I'm doing and what's going on behind the scenes of things is really important too. It not only like I'm not only learning a lot, but I'm also like validating what I know and building a lot of confidence within myself and my ability to coach, which I think is going a really long way.
Well, sometimes it's just like with coaching a client, right? When you have someone standing in front of you acting as a mirror, you're like, fuck, I do really have this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And it's really good to be able to see that in yourself, because sometimes we get into these ruts and it's so hard.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think it's been good for us to have a little bit of outside perspective, and especially and take this the right way. But someone with like Maggie's personality, who, I mean, even when we were training, we were like, okay, this is how we do it. And I remember there was with you guys, and Kat was like, no, we'll do it like this, and Maggie was like, no. This is how we're gonna do it. And Kat was like, oh, she's got some tune. I like that.
I like that.
So I think it's been good to keep us on our toes. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we still have pinch ourselves moments where it's like, you know, 2.5-3 years ago, I was working a job that I hated, and the gym was the highlight of my day. And fast forward like 3 years, and like, this is our life now. And I think bringing you on was a huge step, even to concrete that for us, that it's like, this ain't no side business. This ain't no side hustle anymore. Like, this is the real deal. And we keep setting goals and smashing them. And we've got some pretty high hopes for things that we can do. And at the base of all that is just trying to the best we can to help every single person we work with. And it hasn't let us down so far. So I don't think that's something that we ever plan to change.
Well, I think when you get that and you love your job and you love what you do every day, it's pretty easy
and
to
you
keep
love
going.
the people you work with.
Okay, so it's like, I'm
maybe some more than others. No, but that's this, like, very similar to Sarah and I too, and Mind Strong movement is that we started talking about the idea together, and all of a sudden our thoughts and our ideas and our visions just like perfectly aligned, and there's the momentum. There you go, and boom.
We definitely attract what you put out too, I think. Mm-hmm. And so you want to make sure that you're putting out all the best things, and that's what you end up, you know, claiming back. And it's cool.
Yeah, I love what you guys do. It was good to hear more about it.
We'll have to get you out to Vancouver for a team meeting.
I know, I've never been to Vancouver before, and I really would love to come.
Or we could
do 6 weeks.
Or we could do a little team fly through LAX.
Oh, that's something I can get on board with. Or you come to Australia.
Yeah.
Oh my
Come,
God.
it sounds like I'm going with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to visit.
I love it. Yeah, well, this was so good. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
No
I think
worries.
doing another one would be great too.
Hopefully there's some usable material in there somewhere over the last 45 minutes. And we are still taking clients, because I don't think we've thrown a plug in there.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Mind Strong, the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, Ben and Katrina, for coming on the show and sharing with us all of your knowledge around all these nutrition-related topics, as well as teaching us a bit more about what MTMM is. We'll see you in the next one.